Sorry. Welcome to another episode of Becoming a Techno Wizard. And today we're going to be talking about anarchy once again, continuing this book of Anarchy Works. Such a great book. Super excited about this section. We're going to be talking about education. What about education in an anarchic society? What does that look like? I'm super excited for it. To recap, the last section we talked about healthcare. What about healthcare? Let me see if I can pull up what I little description I wrote on my last video here. Believe I said this section talks about anarchist organizations, how anarchist organizations can and have provide healthcare through the various networks of people who want to provide these services to their communities or ones in need. Getterloo has shares with us a number of stats and examples of putting self-organizing. Um, I have to rewrite this. This is terribly written. But basically, he gave us a bunch of stats and examples of self-organizing like clinics and healthcare services and things like that, which was really awesome to see. And then he also went into how people can band together to help one another when disaster strikes, and you see this in things like Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sally in New York and all these other places. And that really kind of gives you hope in humanity when you see people coming together like that. And really, it's the organizations, these centralized power structured organizations like the government or corporations that try to peddle this propaganda that says, "Oh no, these people are looting and beating each other up and things like that," by trying to focus on very small pockets of chaos or violence, while in general it's anarchy, which is not the same thing, right? It's anarchy, meaning it's a whole bunch of people organizing together to help each other out, right? That's way more common in these types of scenarios. Um, so yeah, he shows that you can have an anarchic um, society, right? An anarchic kind of organization at the same time as uh, actual organization, right? People think it's either anarchy or organization, but no, you can have anarchy with organization. And in fact, organizations, one could argue, are more efficient in an anarchic scenario because you have less bureaucracy, less ego that you're stroking and things like that. Less just bull crap. It's focused on direct action, right? Mutual aid, um, seeing what people actually want and need, and things like that. So, yeah, let's go ahead and jump into this. First, let me share the link around. All right. Without further ado, boo boo boo. All right. What about education? So, super excited once again for this. I'm gonna make some predictions here, right? Because I like to think about this topic specifically, and the next one, which is goes on to what about education? I'm sorry. What about technology? I'm going to predict that he's going to maybe talk about the fact that education is more efficient um, when people have um, less, once again, mass education. Like mass education is we know this for a fact. Mass education does not really educate, right? The school system, the public school system, even many private school systems do not really educate people, right? It's mostly indoctrinating, propagandizing, things like that, kind of trying to make them think a certain way, um, versus a bottom up approach to education very much focuses on what people want to learn, right? What they have a desire to actually go out and learn and gather and things like that. So in an anarchic society, education would very much be a bottom up approach, right? Where every student, well, no matter their age, right, it could be very young or old or whatever, can go out and learn new things whenever they want, right? They don't need an institution to provide that for them. The purpose of an institution, like we like to think that institutions are necessarily a good thing, right? Like this is a huge evolution of humanity. But in actuality, an institution was meant to centralize knowledge, right? And that could be a good or a bad thing. It could be good because, of course, you have a centralized location, like a central library, right, where anybody can go to get that knowledge. But when you deal with hierarchy, right, and people are in charge of who gets access to that knowledge, then what? Knowledge becomes power, right? As opposed to simply being freely available to everybody. You dole out who gets access to this knowledge and that knowledge, and therefore you control the power structure, you control the citizenry, you control what gets thought about, what gets talked about, what gets discovered, what gets used, all that stuff, right? Control the narrative. And so really you can very much argue that institutions are a greater tool for authoritarians than it is for simply educating um, the most people as possible. So yeah, especially in the internet today, like education, and we see this like with YouTube, like what I'm doing here, like it could be way more open and way more generous than people typically have. Uh, but let's see if he gets into that. This is a long chapter, so I need to stop talking. And let me share this in my other server. Okay, let's jump into it. It says, education has long been a education has long been a priority of anarchists and other revolutionary movements around the world. But even if people completely neglected the organization of education after the revolution, that would still be an improvement over the patriotic, degrading, manipulative, and mind-numbing forms of education sponsored by nation state. Already, I'm saying, I just love how this is how Getterlu just opens up shots. He just be throwing shots at the beginning of every statement, like just because this is what it is, right? That, like I said, it's propaganda, and this right here is degrading. Many people hate, the education system, manipulative. They're just telling people what to think, mind numbing. Many people just check out of, learning. They even kind of swear to not read anymore, to not do math anymore after school. It really just destroys, a lot of the fun of learning. Like everyone else, children are capable of educating themselves. Exactly. Or like, people wouldn't believe it, but that's exactly what children do. This is what the human mind does, and are motivated to do so in the proper setting. Yep. But public schools rarely offer that setting. Ain't that the thing? Ain't that something? Nor do they educate the students on topics of immediate usefulness. Mm, like surviving childhood, expressing emotions healthily, developing their unique creative potentials, taking charge of their own health, or caring for sick people, dealing with gender violence, domestic abuse, or alcoholism, standing up to bullies, communicating with parents, exploring their sexuality in a respectful way, finding a job, an apartment, or making do without money, or other skills young people need to live. Wow. He's just like throwing shots, man. This is what I'm talking about. Like, look at all this, right? This is stuff we want and need. And people talk about this all the time, right? Like, oh, what is the purpose of me learning this in school? And this goes back to, me learning about Hegel. And he talks about the fact that philosophy and science, like we should demand something from it, right? We should make those demands to say, teach, what does this show me? Like what purpose of this philosophy or this science is to me, right? It shouldn't be just for knowledge sake. Don't get me wrong, I love knowledge for knowledge sake, but the fact is we need to demand, right, practicality from this stuff. We need to say, how will this help me in my life? What would this allow me to do? What would this allow me to um figure out, right? And if we don't demand that, we're really just destroying ourselves. We're really taking it away from ourselves. So yeah, definitely, this all of this is fantastic, and it's really sad that our education system does not cover pretty much any of them. And a few classes that teach useful hands-on skills, nearly always electives. Yeah, I remember we had like home ec, wood shopping, you know, uh, I don't know, some other ones. I didn't take many other ones, but computers I think was elective when I was earlier in school, which is ridiculous, but yeah, it's crazy. Students are tracked. Girls learn how to cook and sew in home ec. I took home ec too. It was fantastic. boys likely to boys likely to go on to blue collar jobs, learn woodworking in the shop. Yep. It is safe to say that most boys finish high school ignorant how to cook or patch up their clothes. Yeah, I was so proud when when I sewed my first like pillow. I wish I kept it, man. That was so dope. Um, I don't think I really patched clothes, but I did technically learn how to sew some stuff. My grandmother and mom, did that stuff too. which is unfortunately a little stereotypical, but it is what it is, and it's still it's a useful skill either way, right? And it really is sad that these things are segregated to a specific gender. It's ridiculous. Um, and most girls and future white collar workers graduate not knowing how to fix a toilet, mount an electrical installation, repair a bicycle or a car engine. I don't either, don't. Plaster a wall or work with wood. And in the computer and technology classes, the fact that the students often know more than the teachers is a clear indication that something is wrong with this form of education. Indeed. Schools do not even teach kids the skills they need for the crappy jobs they will end up working. Most of this people teach themselves. Customer service skills, retail, all that stuff. Even math. Like math doesn't necessarily teach you easy ways of counting money, right? Just think about that. All the math, and I love math. I was always great at math. I always enjoyed math. But when I got my first retail job, I was like, many of these tricks I learned in math doesn't really come in handy. I'm not using trigonometry when I'm trying to count cash very quickly and count the change and things like that. Like it's funny. um most of this people teach themselves or learn among friends and peers. That is to say, the school of life is already anarchistic. Exactly exactly right. A lot of our lives are already anarchist. Like it's crazy. It's crazy how much people are like, oh, anarchies can't be real. It's not realistic. It's not practical. Like literally, almost every facet of your life that's not a authoritarian hellscape is anarchistic. When you're when you're talking with friends, when you have if you manage to have a family unit that's not completely authoritarian, if you have your peers and your coworkers, right? That all that is an anarchist, type of scenario, type of setup. It's literally we use it every single day. Crazy. Um, the most important lessons consistently taught by schools under the state are to obey arbitrary authority, to accept the imposition of other people's priorities on our lives, and to stop daydreaming. Yeah, which sucks. When children start school, they are self-guided, curious about the world they live in, and believe everything is possible. Right? We see that beautiful child wonder, right? Um, when they finish, they're cynical, yep, self-absorbed, and used to dedicating 40 hours of their week to an activity they never chose. Oh my gosh, bro. I know I need to get through this. Like this is a long section, but God, he is I'm telling you, beautiful preaching. They're also likely to be miseducated in a number of things, perhaps unaware that a majority of human societies throughout history have been egalitarian and stateless. Yes, right? Go check out David Graeber and David Wengrow's History of Humanity or whatever it's called. But also, don't take that for 100%. Also, check out What is Politics. I've been talking about this in my newsletter that I have coming up. Um, actually, let me show it up here. Yeah, y'all check out this. I put the link in the description. Boom. He talks about the dawn of everything, Wengrow and Graeber's book, and he discusses a lot of things they do not discuss or they miss communicate, right? Like they kind of form. I haven't read the book myself, but he's been pretty extensive with it, and I have read their kind of like the pre-chapter things. That was pretty cool, like the thing with the Condorunk and things like that. That was pretty awesome. But they do have a tendency, it seems, to present these egalitarian other societies as like idealistic or like oh, they were just experimenting, right? But no, what is politics, dude? And his YouTube, he points out how these societies were purposeful, right? They purposefully built their societies like this, and they utilized. It was based on material environment, right? It was based on the fact that in certain environments, it's easier or harder to develop an egalitarian society. Therefore, if you live in a society in which the environment makes it easier to centralize power, then you have to do more effort to create an egalitarian society. They don't really talk about that, unfortunately. So, and there's a number of things that kind of misrepresent a little bit. But yeah, like I'm just learning this myself that there is actually hundreds, if not thousands, of societies throughout history that have been egalitarian and stateless. But we don't learn about that, right? We learn about Britain and China and you know Rome and Greece and stuff like that. Not even any African civilizations. Most people know nothing about Africa outside of Egypt, right? Know nothing about the Nubians or Kunt or the Dogon or the Mali, Edo, Zimbabwe, um, Swahili, the I say the Bantu, Khoisan. Like people don't learn anything about these folks, right? And many of these have extremely very varying ways of organizing their societies and things like that, which we don't talk about. The Mbuti, they're still alive in the forest of the Congo area. They're amazing, stateless and egalitarian. Many of the other ones I mentioned were not stateless or egalitarian, but the fact is that we don't even learn about them, right? So yeah, throwing bars over here. Let's continue. So yeah, people don't learn about egalitarian stateless societies. Oh, they also have that they get miseducated about that the police have only recently become an important and supposedly necessary institution, that the government has a record of torture, genocide, and repression. Yeah. That their lifestyles are destroying the environment, that their food and water are poison, or that there is a history of resistance waiting to be uncovered by their very own town, in their very own town. My gosh, I need to keep going, but this is this is it. Like something that really set my education apart is when I was in the IB program and I had to make an essay about like 20th century history, American politics, and I hated. I always never. I always hated like American government politics. It just was the least interesting history to me. But what I did is research the CIA because I knew they had some shady stuff, right? So I researched the CIA, and turns out they had a shit ton of shady stuff, like crazy, right? It's insane. And this is just the stuff that they themselves have released to the public, right? Not even the talking the stuff that's still censored to this day. And so they are extremely grimy with what they did. In terms of all this, literally torture, genocide, repression, all that. And that's our government, our great America, right? Most of it unfounded, and it really is crazy. And it taught me a lot about, because I used to be patriotic, like, yeah, we live in America. It's amazing what we have, what we've accomplished, and all this stuff. But then I look into our history and all this other stuff. I'm just like, what the hell? Like, what the hell? It's crazy. Um, and then the lifestyle destroying the environment, the fact that we like to point out to all Africa or these Australia, or like the country parts of Australia or different parts of South America, or these people are impoverished and poor, and or different parts of Asia. But the fact is that the reason that they're impoverished is because of us, right? It's because of American imperialism going in, taking their shit, pooping all over their land, basically, polluting their land with fracking and mining for all the resources, poisoning their water, the air. Like it's disgusting what we've done to them, literally destroying their environment. And we go around talking about some, yes, we're so wealthy, we're so advanced, and they're impoverished. Like imagine if they did that to us. Imagine China comes over and fracks up all the land, and most of the land that you see is just huge piles of huge holes in the ground where they've mined up all the resources, and you can't even get any drinking water because almost all the streams, Lake Lanier and all these the Michigan lakes and all this other stuff is just full of pollution and all the rivers, the Mississippi River and the Chattahoochee, all these are grimed up because of China's industrialism. Imagine that happened here, right? Yeah, food and water are poison, right? And this is a good thing, right? Like I recently learned that even in America, like even in places that we think have clear, food and water, in actuality, we see microplastics, right? We see carcinogens from all the various pollutions, like all the plastic that we've been dumping into the ocean that we haven't actually been recycling, we've just been dumping into the ocean. It gets dissolved into microplastics, and that plastic gets evaporated with the water vapor, goes into the clouds, rains back down onto farmlands in far into into the countryside, right? So even apples, like they found high levels of microplastics in apples that grow nowhere near the ocean. because of this, because of the water cycle, because of the plastic stuck in the water cycle. And we have no idea what that's actually going to do to us, right? They've done some experiments of saying, oh, microplastics kind of block some parts of our neural receptors and they may impact our um, development and various other things, but we don't really know. This is all kind of new, right? And it's scary. It's really scary. But the fact is that we aren't taught this in our education system. And because of that, many people don't go through the effort of actually doing meaningful reform, but actually trying to change the system because we think it's not that bad. If you Once you realize how bad it is, you're gonna be like, all right, we need to do something. Like we can't sit around and be like, oh yeah, it's whatever, right? I'm gonna try to speed it up, but yeah, I'm sorry, this is just throwing shots. This systematic miseducation is hardly surprising given the history of public schools. Though public schools developed gradually from an array of precedents, the regime of Otto von Bismarck is widely credited with first establishing a national public school system. The purpose was to prepare youth for careers in the bureaucracy or military, discipline them, instill them with patriotism, and indoctrinate them in the culture and history of a German nation that had not previously existed. Mm. Yep. The school system was one of the modernizations that allowed a collection of bickering provinces, some of them practically feudal, to form a state that could threaten the rest of the continent and large parts of Africa within a generation. In response, a number of anarchist theorists set out to design non-hierarchical schools in which teachers would serve as aides helping the students learn and explore their chosen subjects. Some of these anarchist experiments in education in the US were called modern schools on the model of Spanish anarchist Francisco Ferrer's Escuela Moderna, or modern school. Oh, excuse me. Oh, goodness. These schools helped educate thousands of students and played important roles in the anarchist and labor movements. In 1911, shortly after Ferrer's execution in Spain, why? Why was he executed? The first modern school in the U.S. was founded in New York City by Emma Goldman. Ooh, Emma Goldman, she's gold. Alexander Berkman, Voltairine de Cleyre, and other anarchists. A number of famous artists and writers helped teach there, and pupils included the artist Man Ray. It lasted for several decades, eventually moving out of New York City during a period of intense political repression and became the center of a rural commune. I really want to look this up. Is this still existing? More recently, anarchists and other activists in the U.S. have organized free schools. Some of these are temporary ad hoc classes, while some are fully organized schools. One, the Albany Free School, has existed for over 32 years in inner city Albany. This um, anti-authoritarian authoritarian school is committed to social justice as well as education. It offers sliding scale tuition and turns no one away for financial reasons. Let me look this up real quick. Yeah, still there. Wow, amazing. Never even heard about this. See, I'm gonna have to look these things up now. Most experimental schools are only accessible to the elite, but the student body of the Albany Free School is diverse, including many inner city kids from poor families. The school has no curriculum or compulsory classes, operating according to the philosophy trust children and they will learn. Beautiful. Because when you trust kids with their own so-called education, which is not a thing after all, but rather an ever-present action. Exactly. It's not a product; it's a process. Going back to Hegel. They will learn continually, each in their own way and rhythm. The free school teaches children up to eighth grade and has recently opened a high school, the Harriet Tubman Free School. The school organizes a small organic farm in the city, which provides another important learning opportunity for students. Students also work with community service projects such as soup kitchens and daycare centers. Despite financial and other limitations, they have succeeded admirably. Our reputation with students that are struggling academically and or behaviorally and whose needs the system has failed to meet is such that an increasing number of kids are coming to us having previously been tagged with labels like ADHD and placed on Ritalin and other biopsychiatric medications. Their parents seek us out because they're concerned about the side effects of the drugs and because they've heard that we work effectively with these children without drugs of any kind. Our active, flexible, individually structured environment renders the drugs entirely unnecessary. Yes, this is a very, 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 very interesting topic to me because for a long time I've wondered, like, is ADHD and things like that, autism, are these actually like disorders, right? I know it's not necessarily neurotypical, but that doesn't does that mean is it necessarily a disorder, right? Because we know that people can function very highly with these, right? And we say, oh, people can't focus and things like that. But really, when you, especially when you look at high functioning people, or even people that aren't high functioning, when you look at the things that have a problem with, it's mostly with the way in which we structure our society, right? It's not like they literally can't go through life. Like when you have I don't know, something like schizophrenia or something like that, or split personality where it's from a trauma, right? Like this doesn't come from a trauma. It seems to be a primarily genetic thing, a neural kind of architecture, if you will, right? It's how your brain works. And so I wonder, like, especially when people mention how the fact that other societies have these types of people and they don't necessarily have a problem, right? With living in those societies, specifically ones where like more nomadic and hunter-gatherer cultures. They there's some evidence that shows that many hunter-gatherer cultures may have had more ADHD people and things like that, because it may be that this is an adaptation that is better suited for a different environment than what we currently have at large today, right? Meaning the reason why these people can't focus or anything like that is because they're in the wrong environment, right? So create a better environment where people don't have to behave the same way other people do in order to be successful, and see if they flourish, right? At least that's my thoughts on it. I haven't, I'm not some kind of scientist or anything like that, or a doctor, so, or psychologist rather. But something I've been thinking about, and I do want to look more into. The MST, the Landless Workers Movement in Brazil, has focused ardently on education in the settlements they have created on occupied land. Between 2002 and 2005, the MST claims to have taught over 50,000 landless workers how to read. 150,000 children are enrolled in 1,200 different schools they have built on their settlements, and they have also trained over 1,000 educators. The MST schools are free from state control, so communities have the power to decide what their children are taught and can develop alternative methods of education as well as curricula free of the racist, patriotic, and capitalist values that are part and parcel of public education. Beautiful. The Brazilian government complains that children and the settlements are taught that generally modified crops pose a risk to human health and their environment, which suggests that they get a much more relevant and accurate education than their peers in the state-run schools. um, a little GMO shot here. I don't know about this one. You might be off about this one, because I have been looking into this one pretty heavily. Well, not super heavily, but a fair amount. And what seems to be the case here with GMOs is not necessarily that they are unsafe for human, consumption, things like that. It's actually the fact that the pesticides that are used around them are what's unsafe, right? So what happens with GMOs usually is that they try to create um, plants that are resistant to the pesticides that they use. This is what Monsanto does. They create plants that are resistant to the pesticides that people use to, kill the various pests, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, right? So as they try to create these things that are resistant to these, pests and these pesticides, that means that the farmers using that use more pesticides in order to get rid of all the insects, or the different things that would kill your plants. And because of that, right, you have actually more pesticides in the soil and in the food. Right. So the problem is not the food itself, it's not the GMO food, it's the pesticides that we use. So um, GMOs actually can be extremely beneficial for um, creating more food, right, with less land. And there's various ones that can yield more crops per acre and things like that. The problem is, how do we handle the pesticides or fungicides and other things like that? That's the problem, right? So it's a little bit of a nuance there, and many people will be like, "Oh, it's the same thing either way." So, but the point is that there's some nuance there. Eccentric, welcome back. They say there's an Indian historian who wrote a book on how the Glover North, not sure, oh, global North probably North exploited the global South, which led to Western civilization becoming what it is today. I forgot her name. Yeah, yeah, that's very much what happened, right? I would love to read up on that, but that's exactly what happened. Like, I'm interested to see what she says. Don't get me wrong, but you don't even have to like look too far into history to see that. Like, you literally see that every day. Today, you see that in the last century, ever since the 1600s. Transatlantic slavery and onwards. You've been seeing, that's the entire history of imperialism, right? So yeah, definitely eccentric. Thanks for bringing that up there. It's sad, but it's history there. You gotta learn from it. Um, okay. MST schools in the settlements focus on literacy and use the methods of Paulo Freire, who developed the pedagogy of the oppressed. In Sao Paulo, the MST has built itself an autonomous university which trains farmers nominated by the individual settlements. Rather than teaching, for example, agribusiness as a capitalist university would, they teach family agriculture with the critique of the exploitive and environmentally destructive techniques prevalent in contemporary agriculture. For other technical courses, the MST also helps people get educations in public universities, though they often with a collaboration of left wing professors to offer more critical lessons of a high caliber, even enabling them to design their own courses. They emphasize in all forms of education that it is the responsibility of the students to use what they learn for their community and not for individual profit. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful stuff. I would love to learn more about this stuff and start my own thing because this is why I've been super interested. For since I was in school, I wanted to create my own school system. Right, that's like the whole thing is bullshit. It's crap. It's terrible. Right, like how can we make education fun? How can we make learning fun? How can we make it lifelong? Like my one of my dreams is to create a lifelong institution or really network of institutions in which people can easily check in and out, right? They can go to school at any point in their life, just like you would go to the library, right? And pick up some new knowledge, do some projects, do some real world practice to, apply that knowledge. So it's not just theoretical, right? You can put scientific labs in here, right? So people can be more kind of open to science and understand the process of science and how it works and things like that, and more people can be involved. Right now, I guarantee you 99.99% of people have no idea where people do science. Like if you ask, where's your local library? I mean, where's your local laboratory? All right, where people do science. Like where is that? Like point to me where people do that. Most people probably have no idea, right? I would love to make it so that we have laboratories that are like libraries where people can just come in and be a part of the process or just observe or see what people are learning and doing and experimenting with and things like that, so they can actually get that scientific literature or some scientific literacy and exposure, right? And then if you combine that with things like career services where people learn, different skills, they can easily reskill to do a new career or just jump onto like different projects that people are doing, different co-ops and things like that, how to be a part of your community better. All this you can put together in a the best term is an institution, but it's not necessarily like top down, right? You don't, there's no, it's more like a library. Once again, like there's nobody saying whether or not you can come in. You don't have to apply. You don't have to, pay to get in or anything like that. It's just open, right? And people go in and out whenever they want. So I think we need more things like that. All right, let's continue. Let me drink some water first. As I do, I'd love to hear what are some of your ideas for what would make a better education system. What would that look like to you? Put it in the comments, or if you're here in the stream, put that in the stream. I'd love to hear what people have to say. Mm. Stay hydrated. The Movimiento Campesino de Santiago de Estero. You wouldn't believe I took 3 years of Spanish. You wouldn't. Or otherwise, Mokasi or Mokas, I don't know. It's a group of farmers, many of them Quechua, with similarities and connections to the MST, beginning as a group of farmers fighting for land in the face of expansion by forestry companies from the global north. Oh, goodness, excuse me. They now number 8,000 families in 58 communities, active in a broad range of struggles, working together with the Universidad Transhumanant. They set up a farmers, I guess, transhuman university. Yeah. They set up a farming school that helps farmers learn the skills necessary for self management. The students also learn to teach so they can help train other farmers. The Universidad Transhumant is interesting in its own right. It is a popular education university, also inspired by Ferrer, that organized a year long caravan to 80 cities around Argentina. That is fun. I've been thinking about doing something like that for a long time now, too. I love that. To present popular education workshops and problems people face. Outside of the control of the state, education need not be a static, fixed thing. Exactly. It can be a tool of empowerment as people are taught how to teach so they can pass on the lessons they learn rather than being permanently dependent on a class of professional educators. Exactly. It can be a tool of liberation as people learn about authority and resistance and study how to take control over their own lives. It can be a caravan, a circus as people travel across a country and instead of bringing cage spectacles, they bring new ideas and techniques. I love that. That's exactly what the Bantu people did throughout like Africa for almost over 1,000 years, right? Maybe probably a couple thousand years. They traveled around um, uh, Africa from east to south to west to southeast, like traveling around, and they were usually the most technologically advanced and knowledgeable because they, picked up and shared knowledge back and forth across these different areas, around the world. It became pretty crazy because they were easily able to kind of disrupt many of the places that tried to settle down, right? Many as places try to settle down and form kingdoms and whatnot, the Bantu would just come through with their new knowledge and new technologies and just disrupt the whole thing. And so sometimes people would regard the Bantu as a like invasive force or as like a bad thing, but they rarely ever like went to war. I don't think they really warred with anybody like that. They just changed the culture wherever they went. They continuously were learning and growing to the point where even to this day, I think Bantu languages are like one of the biggest families of language and ethnicity across Africa because of this. Even though they're not necessarily a cohesive group anymore. So yeah, I really love this idea, and I would love to see a version of this today. Right. Imagine being able to just travel with a whole group of people to different cities around the world, right? That's amazing. Like many people today are too static, too settled in place, and rarely ever, communicate with people from different places. Even though we live in a time of the internet, where you can be a digital nomad, where you can connect with anybody from anywhere, anytime. We can do this, but people don't, right? And because of that, people get put in these echo chambers, in these ru- in communities and environments where they're never really communicating with people who's different from them. And because of that, you have all these stereotypes that blow up into extremist views and all this bull crap. So yeah, I would I really love this. um yeah, and it can be a tool for survival as oppressed peoples learn about their histories and prepare for their futures. Yeah. In 1969, Native American activists organizing under the name Indians of All Nations occupied the abandoned Alcatraz Island, citing an ignored U.S. law guaranteeing that indigenous people had a right to occupy any land that settler nation abandoned. Ooh, huh. For 6 months, the occupation numbered in the hundreds, and though most left because of a government blockade, the occupation ultimately lasted for 19 months, revitalizing indigenous culture and rejecting colonial control. During the early period, the Indian occupiers organized a school that taught indigenous history and culture from their own perspective, without the racist propaganda that filled the textbooks of the government schools. For the duration of their occupation, they used education as a means of cultural renewal, whereas it had previously been used against them to destroy their identity and conscript the survivors of the genocide into the civilization that had colonized them. Wow, amazing. Amazing. I would love to do that. That's something I want to do as well. Is like go across and take like these abandoned properties because there's so many here in Atlanta, and I'm sure many other cities. Like take abandoned properties and like upgrade them, like turn them into better, areas, and maybe even reclaim the land. Right? Like one of my cousins was saying that as a Haitian American, technically I can claim, indigenous people because many Haitians were part indigenous people. Right? They weren't just all people from Africa. Many people in our family were part they had indigenous people that was here already before they brought the Africans over. So I have some parts of me that may have indigenous folks as well as African. So I would love to look more into that as well. And there's a couple other stuff in there, but yeah, it's really interesting. And overall, I really like this chapter. He was throwing shots, throwing had a bunch of bars, dropping bars, and just like pure fire. um, Great stuff he went over here. I look forward to this next area because it's technology, man. That's what I do. Is what I think about a lot, and it's long. Oh my gosh, long section. So yeah, I'm excited about it. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts as always in the comments below or in the stream. Um, and again, what are some of your ideas for how we can change the education system? What would a better education system look like to you? Especially one that is decentralized, that is lifelong, that is bottom up rather than top down, that is that embraces people's natural curiosities and passions and kind of encourages people to constantly learn new things and things like that. Like, what does that look like to you? I would love to hear what people have to say about that. And yeah, have a great day. Let's figure out how we can build together. If you're here in Atlanta, hit me up because I really want to do something together. If you're somewhere else around the world, hit me up still because I still want to do something together. So either way, hit me up. Let's do something. Right now, I'm just learning and growing and sharing stuff, but I really want to do more practice stuff and see where we can be a part of a co-op or something like that. And super excited. So yeah, thanks for watching. I said it like 5 times already. So thanks again. Have a great day. See ya. Bye bye.